Alright everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of Pure Grade Puroresu. Not doing a review today. Today I'm going to be doing my first preview for New Japan's New Beginning in Osaka show, which is about 4 days time from when I'm recording this right now. Not going to do any, like 2 to 3 minute long housekeeping section at the start. We're just going to jump right into this because I hope to get this, I hope to make this a sort of a shorter episode. I'm aiming for like half an hour, but I tend to ramble a lot. So let's see how it goes. First match, Liger, Kojima, and Tenzon versus Taka Michinoku, Iizuka, and Suzuki. Now look, I'm not gonna, just like when I did my review of the New Beginning and Sapporo shows, and I was like, look, I can't give too much of an in-depth analysis of the undercard matches. I likewise can't do that in a preview setting. So the few comments I have to make here are, first of all, Suzuki is once again being shafted further and further down the New Japan card. And I know we just saw him in a tag match for the tag titles, only on the Sapporo show, but you have to remember he was off of the main Wrestle Kingdom show, and here he is in the very first opening match of the show. So, I mean, that just made me think, if this becomes like a constant thing, then we have to really think about the possibility that that we're seeing it unfold right before our eyes, that New Japan is trying to move Suzuki down the card and actually face him out of the main event scene, which I think would be terrible because he can obviously still go. But yeah, so that's one little thing I thought was noteworthy in this random match. The other one was obviously Iizuka. He's been, getting himself DQ'd on these Road 2 shows and in the Sapporo shows for the New Beginning, and he's also had a bit of a rivalry with Tenzon. Now, I didn't actually watch their tag match on the second night of the Sapporo show, but apparently Tenzon went on the mic afterwards and was like, "Hey Iizuka, what are you doing?" Sort of reprimanded him, I guess. And apparently, this sounds very funny. Apparently, Iizuka grabbed the mic, and people were like, "Holy shit, the crazy monster that has to wear a muzzle! He's going to take the mic to speak." But in the end, he actually apparently used the cord of the mic to start choking Tenzon. So maybe they'll develop that story. What else can I really say about this match? It's probably going to be like 2 stars. It's going to be fine. You got all the veterans in there. They're going to work hard. Suzuki's probably going to make all the other veterans work a bit harder as well, I hope. Let's move on to the next match, which is the IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Champions, Sanada and Evil, in a very interesting matchup up against the Young Lion team of Yoshida and Umino. I mentioned this in my review of the 2 Sapporo shows. I said, I think I did at least, or at least I had it in my mind at the time and didn't say it. It would be very interesting, wouldn't it, if the Young Lion team somehow eked out a win against the tag team champions. Now, there is a 99.9% chance that absolutely does not happen because New Japan, like most of the Japanese wrestling promotions, they're very strict in their format where it's like, okay, you're a young lion for 2 years, you eat shit, you do shit, you wrestle with like 3 moves, and then once we say you can go, then you can start looking like a good wrestler. So I am not expecting at all for the Young Lions to somehow like get a cradle pin or something and end up pinning either of Evil and Sanada in order to earn themselves a title shot, even though I think that would be awesome. I actually just got done watching the Dragon Gate Truthgate show from the 5th of February, and that had a really cool story. Avoid the next like 10 seconds if you don't want spoilers, but all the rookies on that show ended up pinning some established wrestlers, and I thought that was a really cool idea to build up their rookies as opposed to just sending them on excursion and then having them come back a year and a half later. So, yeah, this would probably be a pretty good match, I think, because we know the Young Lions always work well, and here they've actually got a very, Umino and Yoshida, they've got a very interesting opportunity here because they're up against a serious tag team. They're not up against, Nagata and Tenzon and Nakanishi. They're actually up against some wrestlers who are, they're some of the current stars of the promotion and can actually go and, move at a pace that's quicker than, like, 0.2 kilometers an hour as we get with like Tenzon and the like. So this could actually be a really good match. Like this could easily be like 3.5 stars. You got the Young Lion energy, you got Sanada and Evil probably want to prove their dominance as champs. This could be very fun. Next, we have an LIJ versus Suzuki-gun match. So we have the IWGP Junior Tag Champs. I'm going to say Sanada. Sorry, there's so many people with S's in their names in New Japan. Shingo and Bushi, alongside the IC champion Naito versus Kanemaru, Desperado, and Taichi. So the entire Suzuki-gun team here, they obviously lost in their title challenges on the second night of the New Beginning in Sapporo. And because of that, I think it's pretty obvious that we're not going to immediately set up a rematch. Kanemaru or Desperado isn't going to suddenly pin Bushi in order to set up yet another tag title match after they've already had a failed challenge. And it's even less likely that Taichi gets a pin over Naito to have another IC title challenge. So to me, it seems pretty obvious that Shingo's probably going to be the one to pin either of Desperado or Kanemaru. I'm trying to think to myself, because you know how every tag team, at least in New Japan, has like the fall guy. I try to think to myself, with Desperado and Kanemaru, who is the fall guy? Because I just don't pay attention to that with him. Because I'd be inclined to say it's Kanemaru, because he's the veteran guy who's been around longer, and I feel like New Japan probably wants to keep Desperado at least strong to some extent. Because actually, how old is Kanemaru? Let me just do like some quick on-air research. Sorry, how old is Desperado? Because Kanemaru is like what, 40 or something? Let me check. Well, Desperado, he's 35. Okay, I actually thought he was like in his early 30s. But either way, he's still the younger guy of the two. And I feel like at some point New Japan has to start phasing Kanemaru out of, all the junior tag title challenges, but they can still keep Desperado around for a lot longer. So they might not even be thinking that much about it, going into it as in-depth as I am. But I would have Kanemaru take the fall, because even though I'm not super big on Desperado as other people seem to be, like last year during the Super Juniors, people were crazy high on him, being like, wow, we always knew he had it in him. And I was like, yeah, he's been pretty good, but I don't think he's like, amazing or blow away. But yeah, so I don't think he's going to take the fall. It's probably going to be another instance of the Shingo show where Shingo just totally dominates the entire enemy team. It sounds like I'm in the fucking army or something, or I'm playing Call of Duty or Battlefield, the enemy team. But yeah, Shingo's probably going to just, give a great performance, show off his power and strength. He's probably going to get the win over Kanemaru. This could easily be a really good match, because, you'll also be reigniting the Taichi and Naito interactions. And hey, even if you thought that their match was shit, I think that you would have still enjoyed like the second half of their actual match, not including the first like 10 to 15 minutes that was taken up by the brawl, because those like final 10 minutes at least, those were like the typical sort of New Japan big move exchanges that we already love from the majority of New Japan's other main events. So hey, I think without the big Taichi bullshit, even the Taichi detractors will probably end up enjoying this match. I'm expecting this to be like 3.25 stars, maybe better. We'll see. The next match is a pretty random tag match. We have Yoshihashi teaming with Honma to go up against the Bullet Club of Chase and Yujiro. So that doesn't look very appealing on paper, but I think this could actually be pretty decent. You have to remember that Chase Owens always works incredibly hard. I always forget how he has sort of like the on the old WWE Raw versus SmackDown games. I haven't played those in like 10 years or more, but whenever you'd give them, like, you'd create a character and you'd give them like a bunch of like the coolest moves possible, like you give them all the moves where they drop their opponents on their heads or that sort of thing. I feel like that's what Chase is. He feels like a creator wrestler, because I see this guy who's he's pretty pudgy, he doesn't have a very cool look, but then he has some really great moves and he puts great impact into all of them. He always works hard. I think he could really put on a good showing here, especially alongside Yoshihashi, who, and I also mentioned this in my Sapporo review, Yoshihashi always works well. But the thing is, Yoshihashi usually works best when he's paired alongside New Japan stars like, Okada, Ibushi, Tanahashi, those sorts of people. So with Yoshihashi being teamed with people who are more like C or D grade wrestlers, Yujiro, Honma, and Chase, I don't know if we're going to get that same energy from Yoshihashi, because to be fair, a lot of Yoshihashi's best interactions in the ring usually come when he's paired with someone who can take a great bump and really sell his offense and, sort of heighten Yoshihashi from being what his natural mediocre state to actually being like very good. But there's also Honma, and, people always mention how broken down Honma is. I don't think he's nearly as broken down as people seem to think. I've heard some people, like certain podcasts saying, oh yeah, his arm just hangs by his side, it doesn't do anything. And I'll admit his arm sometimes looks a bit off, but he actually uses it during the match. It's not like the arm's fucking, broken and it's not like his arm had to be amputated from his broken neck and they've sewn on another fake arm and it just hangs limp by his side. He can still go to some extent, but he is mostly just a, like a fan service wrestler at the moment. He goes in there, he does his Kokeshi headbutt spots, he roars his, broken, vocal cord voice, he does all that, but he's not the Honma of 2015 and 2016, where he could actually put on a very physically demanding match alongside the likes of Ishii or Shibata. We don't have that Honma anymore, sadly, but he's still good for a laugh, which is ultimately disappointing given that he was such a genuinely great wrestler before then. But hey, I'm just glad the guy can still wrestle, can still walk, can still go about his life to a normal extent, at least as far as we know. And hey, at least he can still make money for this. Yujiro, I've actually enjoyed Yujiro for a while. When I first got into New Japan, he didn't appeal to me at all. I thought he was so lame. I just didn't get him. But I guess the sort of gimmick of him playing up, being a playboy and that sort of thing, I guess it's sort of cool. And he does actually have some cool moves. And look, he has a few cool singles matches every now and then. Like there was a match he had against Juice Robinson. I believe it was I think it was the first round of the New Japan Cup last year, I think, and he also had a pretty good match against Beretta back in, I think that was 2017. So hey, every now and then he has a good match. I'm giving way too long of an analysis for such a random tag team match, but hey, this could actually be decent. On paper it looks bad. That's all I'm saying. Next match, we have another sort of random tag team match, sort of just, I guess, thrown together because New Japan's being like, oh shit, we got to get all of our bloody wrestlers on the show somehow. So this is Yano and Makabe, the most violent players, teaming up for I believe the first time in a pure 2 versus 2 scenario in I guess, when did Chaos come around? I feel like Chaos came around like 2009 or something. So I guess for the first time in like 10 years or something. I don't know if it was 2009 when Chaos came around. Maybe 2011? Who cares? Anyways, they're teaming up against God, Tamatonga, and Tangaloa. I feel like this match is going to act as the de facto #1 contendership match for the IWGP heavyweight tag titles, because it just makes sense, because God, they're like 4 or 5 time heavyweight tag champs, which is so embarrassing and stupid to think about. But they've got that that baggage behind them, and here they're going up against another tag team. And I haven't done my research, so I probably deserve to be stoned right now. Throw your stones at me and burn me on the cross. But I feel like most violent players were probably had some titles in their history. So it just makes sense to have this match, and just get a #1 contender out of it. Because I was saying the other day, I think on my Sapporo review, that I'm not sure where we go after Sonata and Evil. Like obviously Sonata and Evil are facing the Young Lions, and there's like a 0.001% chance the Young Lions earn themselves a title shot, but it's basically impossible. So you've got to think ahead for who another potential challenger is, and I certainly don't want it to be God. But to be fair, I'm not super thrilled with having it be most violent players, mostly because I was always annoyed whenever I saw Yano in his tag team matches with Ishii. But maybe Makabe gets great reactions from the crowd. Maybe we'll get a different Yano, because he'll be invigorated being with his old tag team. He'll be like, oh, I've got something to prove now. But yeah, this could end up, I don't think this is going to be a very good match. Like Yano is always entertaining, but his shtick, like he's a comedy wrestler, but his shtick, his gimmick sort of wears on me, because he does the same spots over and over and over for 10 years in a row. Like with other comedy wrestlers like Taguchi, at least Taguchi is usually coming up with different comedy spots. He changes. Like sometimes it'll be cultural. It's like, oh, here's the Rugby World Cups this year, I'm going to do a bunch of rugby related bits. Or maybe when the baseball was on, he'll do some baseball bits. He's constantly coming up with new ideas and incorporating them into his matches in a way that doesn't feel like it's just totally detracting from the actual wrestling match itself. So yeah, just a random aside there to criticize Yano and say, hey, Taguchi, he's actually the better comedy wrestler. And we'll actually talk about Taguchi in this next match, because let's just jump right into previewing Taguchi versus Ishimori. Now, you've probably heard this a million times before from other Western New Japan fans, but it is true. Taguchi, when called upon, is a great wrestler, okay? And I know, even though I've prefaced it, you are already rolling your eyes because you've heard that 1,000 times. The words that, when asked, when given the tap on the shoulder, Taguchi can give a great match. But look, it's true. Taguchi actually is a great wrestler. I remember watching him all throughout 2015. I thought he was just a comedy wrestler. I didn't get his appeal at all. I had no idea why the fans reacted so strongly to him. And then I saw his run in the 2016 Best of the Super Juniors tournament, and he was totally different. He was working so hard. His chemistry was on point with everyone. He, all of the big spots where he was meant to be the focus, he came off perfectly, and he had an amazing match against Ospreay. And then in the 2017 Best of the Super Juniors, he also had some more great matches. I believe he had a really great match against Kushida. I don't remember him having a very impressive showing in the 2018 Best of the Super Juniors, so that was a definite step down. But look, I've seen enough matches from him to know that he can be great, because even then, and last year, he had that really great match against Hiromu at the anniversary show. So look, it's not a lie, it's not a myth that's been perpetuated by, you know, silly Western fans. It really is true. Taguchi is great when he wants to be. Sadly, I feel the opposite about Taiji Ishimori. So, Ishimori, he came from Noah, he came into the company and everyone was suddenly putting him over as like the greatest junior ever. Obviously not to that extent, I'm being a bit facetious here, but people were saying, oh, he was the greatest junior in Noah's history, oh, he's so amazing. And then he was sort of lackluster until he had that amazing match against Hiromu for the Best of the Super Juniors finals. And up until that moment, like that match, I was like, yeah, Ishimori has been okay, but he hasn't been as great as people were saying. And then he had that match against Hiromu, the finals, and I was like, okay, this is what I was hoping for. Now I'm getting on the train. But ever since, this is, I guess, an issue of the booking, but ever since that match, he really hasn't impressed at all. Like, because you got to think, the Best of the Super Juniors finals, when was that? That would have been... Was that May? When do they have the Super Juniors finals? That was either in April or May. And for the rest of the year, Ishimori just wasted away. He was mostly tagging with God. So what do you think that does for your status in the company? Teaming with Tama Tonga and Tangaloa and meaningless tag matches. And he ended up winning the never open weight 6-man tag titles. And wow, what a fucking achievement that is. No one gives a shit about those titles. So I have no reason to care about Ishimori that entire time. And then he ended up having a totally forced challenge against Kushida. There was no real story. I think, like, the only story I can remember was that he faked being injured, and so New Japan kept him off a show, but then he came out after the match, which actually involved Kushida, and revealed, oh, he wasn't injured. I guess he just didn't want to be in the match so that he could get the jump on Kushida in the post-match. And then he challenged Kushida for Wrestle Kingdom, and had a very, very lackluster match, like a total 3 stars. He wasn't nearly as impressive as we all wanted him to be. I was sort of like, even though I had my issues with Ishimori being like, I don't think he's as great as everyone was saying, I was still thinking to myself, hey, as Wrestle Kingdom, whenever Kushida has a big junior title match, at least with someone who's a relatively good wrestler, it's usually a great match in the end. But I guess maybe it was the booking, maybe they just didn't get enough time, but it's a junior style match. You got 10 minutes, and it's not like you got 5 minutes. You can put on a great match in that time, but for whatever reason, they just chose to go very grapple heavy. It wasn't very exciting, and I put that mostly down to Ishimori, because Kushida, God rest his soul, he's left the company, probably going to NXT or 205 Live. Kushida always has great matches. He has a massive list of 4.5 star plus matches against various opponents. And if you think of Ishimori, really his only big match in his career, like singles, was that match against Hiromu. Because I've been going through the list of recommended matches for Ishimori, and all of his other matches are usually like the totally acceptable junior matches against like Taichi, or I think like Daisuke Harada in Noah. And then all the other big matches people talk about him, they're just tag matches where he isn't even the main focus, especially in Noah. So I guess my point here is that I really need Ishimori to step up here. He hasn't been very impressive for almost an entire year, and, the Best of the Super Juniors is coming up very soon. He's definitely going to be champion going into that, and I hope he gives a very good showing and can sort of win me over. But, hey, you need to start here, Ishimori. You started the year pretty poorly in your match against Kushida. You've got Taguchi, who is a very well-rounded opponent who has solid chemistry with everyone. You need to have a great match with Taguchi. And there's the story going into this match is that Taguchi actually ended up submitting Ishimori with the Omai and Garfunkel ankle hold on one of the shows in order to win, for Taguchi to win his team the 6-man titles. So yeah, he has an actual visual recorded win over Ishimori, and obviously that ankle, it's going to play into the match. And the ankle lock, as well as probably targeting Ishimori's ankle and just generally working over the leg. But also earlier in that match, Taguchi hit the Dodon, which is the, I believe it's called the arm or the underhook facebuster, where he lifts them up, he grabs their arms, lifts them up, and just places them, face down. Or maybe I think he actually puts them down onto his knees, so it's sort of like a gut buster. Either way, he used that, the Dodon, and he got the visual pin over Ishimori, but sadly the ref was pulled out of the ring before they could count the 3, but it was clear that Ishimori had taken the full brunt of that attack and wasn't going to kick out. So I think that the Omai and Garfunkel ankle hold and that Dodon are going to play big threats in this singles match for the IWGP Junior title. But look, Taguchi, when was the last time he was junior champ? I want to say it was 2014, I think, because he lost the title to Omega at Wrestle Kingdom in 2015. So yeah, look, they're not going to start putting the title back on Taguchi, even though I think that would be awesome. I really think Taguchi could have a really good junior title run. So yeah, they're definitely going to keep it on Ishimori. I just need Ishimori to step up. This could easily be 4 stars if both guys really work hard, but then again, this could also easily be like 3 stars at best. It really just depends on Ishimori for me. And I feel like people are probably going to hate me being like, why do you fucking put so much, why are you giving so much praise to the guy who uses his ass as opposed to the guy who like flies around the ring so freely? But look, guys, it's just what I've seen, in my time watching New Japan and my time watching Ishimori in Noah and in New Japan thus far. I just feel that Taguchi is a more well-rounded wrestler. But hey, I'm willing for Ishimori to blow me away and give me like a 4.5-star match here against Taguchi. Just do your worst, Ishimori, do your worst. Next match is Okada versus Fale. Every year for as long as I've been watching New Japan, which is since 2015, Okada has usually always had a bit of a program with Fale, where at some point in the year, Fale will get a pin over him in maybe a tag match or a G1 match, and then Okada has to fight back later on and prove to himself as well as to Fale and the fans that was just a fluke, that even though Fale is a monster, Okada himself is the ace and he can overcome the monster. So we're getting this pretty early on here. In the Road 2 shows, in the Sapporo shows, they were constantly faced up against each other, where it was Okada and Tanahashi versus Jay White and Fale. And I actually expected Fale to get the pins over Okada in order to keep the result up in the air for Tanahashi and Jay. But in the end, it ended up being Jay who was constantly getting the upper hand over Tanahashi and sometimes even submitting him. I don't think he ever pinned him, but I think he definitely submitted him. So Okada and Fale have been kept away from each other. So what do I think is going to happen here in their singles match? So there are 2 theories. Either Okada is going to beat Fale after Fale dominates for like 80% of the match, and this is going to signal the start of Okada's, finally coming back from his downfall, finally, taking the airplane controls and pulling the nose up just before it finally hits rock bottom in the sea. So there's that option, and that will lead to, Okada maybe having a New Japan Cup run where he actually wins and gets to challenge for the title again at the Madison Square Garden show, or we're going to have Okada lose his match against Fale, and we're just going to continue Okada's just awful spiral. Not awful as in storytelling, because I actually think that's been very good thus far, the story of Okada's downfall since losing his title. I just mean, from a kayfabe perspective, Okada would be like, holy shit, I'm losing big match after big match. I lost to Jay, and now I've lost to his henchman who can barely fucking move in the ring. This is embarrassing. So, yeah. When New Japan has a special singles match, it's usually there for a reason. And this is happening right before the main event between Tanahashi and Jay for the heavyweight title, remember. So I feel like this match could easily act as the de facto #1 contendership title either way. So if Tanahashi retains, then I think if Okada beat Fale, then he could come out and he could challenge Tanahashi. And that would be fine. But then it's like, I was thinking that, and then I'm thinking to myself, what would be the reason for that? Plus, because we've just started having Okada and Tanahashi teaming together, but then also, where would they even challenge? I know New Japan usually does an anniversary show in late March, but they usually don't have a title match. They usually have they usually have the IWGP Heavyweight Champion have a commemorative sort of match. So in the past, it's been against the Junior Champion. So we have Okada against Ibushi in 2014 and Okada against... Oh, sorry, was it 2014? 2013 it must have been, because Ibushi was heavyweight in 2014, at least at the end of the year. And also last year, 2018, we had Okada versus Ospreay. So yeah, they don't usually do heavyweight title matches on that show. So I was thinking, look, where will they do that? And then you've got the New Japan Cup to actually determine the next number one contender. So yeah, I don't think that's really an option. Maybe they could, maybe Okada could win his match and Tanahashi could win his match, and then at the end of the show we have both of them, the double aces come out, the Mega Powers, stand together and sort of, happy with themselves to have vanquished Jay and Fale, at least for the meantime. There's also the option of Fale just pinning Okada and then coming out and challenging Tanahashi. But that feels sort of weird because that's sort of a heroic thing for the face to do, for like, the disciple or like the apprentice to have their master lose a title challenge, and then the apprentice is like, hey, I'm going to avenge my master. I'm going to challenge for the title of the person who beat my master. So that would sort of make Fale face almost if he stood up for his, for Jay, his Bullet Club leader who lost, and he challenged Tanahashi. Plus, that's just not a match that I want to see. But New Japan, they always like to give Fale a title challenge, like maybe at least once every 2 years, so maybe this would be his. But then again, it's the issue of where would he challenge, unless they did it on the anniversary show, or because I can't think of any other big shows New Japan has before we go into April or March. It's usually the anniversary show. And when is the Madison Square Garden show? Is that in May or April? Because it's meant to be replacing Sakura Genesis, so it must be early April. So, yeah, so I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is just going to be just a straightforward singles match between Okada and Fale. Obviously, I hope Okada wins just so he can continue his, he can at least start his final ascent from the bottom of, wherever he is in this storyline of his. And look, you don't need to give Fale the win here, but then it's like, oh, could there be an interesting story of Okada remaining so weak until like the time of the G1 and then winning the G1 miraculously? Because that would be like some real dedication to taking your ace and telling the story of his just utter downfall. But then in that process, if you want Okada to lose here, you have to give Fale a win, and then that sort of implies you have to do something with Fale, because you can't just take someone and give them a win over Okada and then not do anything with that person. And I don't want anything to happen with Fale, so it's like, oh, what do you want to do? So I guess the best option here, at least for me, is to have Okada have the win, but I guess not really act on it. Because if you think about it, he couldn't really just come out and challenge Tanahashi. And I know New Japan is sort of flimsy with their, like, what counts as a title challenge. Like, sometimes someone will have already beaten someone, but then that person will come back and say, yeah, I know you beat me for the title, but I want to challenge you again, even though I haven't done anything to earn it. So New Japan could easily do that, but hopefully they're going to think to themselves, okay, Okada got his singles win over Fale, but that doesn't mean he can challenge Tanahashi right away. And as I've already said, there's probably no room for them to throw that in. So, look, this could be... I'm honestly not expecting this to be very good, just because I've seen some Okada and Fale matches in the past, and it's been okay. There have been some that have been very good, but Fale's formula is just so stale. He's only ever interesting when he's up against either Okada and Tanahashi, and I've seen so many Okada vs. Fale matches that I'm just not interested. I think this is going to be like 3 stars. Maybe Okada will give like a really great selling performance and it'll be better, but yeah, I don't have super high hopes. Now we come to the main event, which is Tanahashi defending his IWGP Heavyweight title against Jay White. The most important thing to note here is the high stakes for Jay White, because in the eyes of a lot of fans, at least a lot of Western fans, he needs to have a blow-away match. I actually still haven't seen his match against Juice Robinson from the US show in the mid last year, and people were saying that was his best singles match. I still haven't seen it, just because at the time I'd sort of gotten bored of Juice at the time, and I was also just totally depressed because that was a show where Hiromu broke his neck, and at the time we had no idea what was happening with Hiromu, whether he was actually going to be able to walk, whether he was ever going to come back to wrestling. We still, I guess, technically don't know that. We expect he's going to, but at the time I was just totally depressed. I just couldn't sit through the rest of that show after finding that out, and so I never ended up watching that match, and I just don't know if I can be bothered at this point. Like, I probably should. I can get over the fact that, hey, Hiromu's okay now. You can go back and watch the match. But, yeah, so people gave him props for that match, but I feel like the general consensus was that people were usually more praising Juice's performance and sort of being like, oh, yeah, Jay played well, but Juice was the real star. And then there was the Wrestle Kingdom match against Okada, and to me, that's my favorite Jay White match that I've seen. I love that match a lot more. Well, there were some people that thought it was great, but also a lot of people, at least on Cage Match, who thought that it was very average. Like, they just can't buy into the Jay White character at all, and hey, that's fair enough. I think he's a character that takes a while to get into, but I thought he played his heel role perfectly. I thought Okada was magnificent playing just the pure babyface, and I thought their characters just worked perfectly with each other, and I thought that Jay White actually has some very decent pure wrestling when he gets past all of his heel shtick. But yeah, apparently not a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say that, not enough people agreed with me that that was a great match and that sort of solidified Jay as being a genuine, like, good or great wrestler. So for Jay, he really has to have a big match with Tanahashi because he's had 3 matches with Tanahashi and they've all been, like, all right to good, with, like, maybe one of them, I can't remember whether it was the G1 match or the King of Pro Wrestling match, one of them was very good, but he hasn't had enough good, great matches as opposed to the other likes of, Ibushi, Ishii, Okada, Naito, Omega. So that's really what's stopping him from actually reaching that echelon. Echelon? I shouldn't have used that word. I was trying to sound smart, guys. I'm sorry. He just hasn't reached that level as the other New Japan top stars. And yeah, so I guess the pressure's on for him. Tanahashi, I guess he also has some pressure, to be fair, because he's got to be like, okay, I've had 3 matches with this guy. None of them have been, my typical, standard blow away, 4 3/4 style. So I really need to bring something special out of him, especially because this is for the IWGP Heavyweight title. Because before, he's just been facing him for the IC title in the G1, and then for the, for the number 1 contendership for the Wrestle Kingdom. And so now he's got to be like, okay, I've got to defend the prestige of this belt. I really got to lift Jay up. So look, let's hope they work well together and give us a great match. Like, if they gave me like a 4-star match, I'd be happy. But I think just for the general Western fan consensus, people are expecting like 4 3. Well, they're not expecting 4 3/4. They're probably thinking they're going to get like 3 stars. But if they got 4 3/4, then that's probably what would finally bring them around to being like, okay, yeah, Jay White, this dude, he's actually pretty good. Watching the Road 2 shows and the Sapporo shows, the story going into this match is obviously going to be centered around limb work, because the most obvious factor is that Jay has been targeting Tanahashi's legs. And I believe he's actually also been doing that like ever since when he announced himself back at Power Struggle in 2017, because I remember him targeting Tanahashi's leg at the time when he revealed himself and attacked him. So yeah, that's going to be the story, and he's been targeting the leg with this sort of inverted figure 4 lock, and he actually managed to tap him out on the first night of the Sapporo show. So that's obviously going to factor in there. But I also noticed, I can't remember if this was on the Road 2 shows or on the second night, well, the first and second nights of the Sapporo show, but Tanahashi has also been targeting Jay's legs as well. He obviously didn't do it as extensively as Jay was targeting his legs, but there's an option there for, sort of mirror dual limb work. So that could be very interesting. Tanahashi always does, like, whenever he has a match where it involves leg work, whether it's his own leg or someone else's leg, it usually ends up being an amazing match. Like, I think back to his Wrestle Kingdom match against Naito, and obviously all of his matches against Okada, also his match from last year's New Beginning, in, I can't remember where, that match against Suzuki with Tanahashi's own leg being worked over. So yeah, that's a structure that really appeals to Tanahashi. I'm really, really hoping this match ends up being great. It could easily just end up being like 3.5 stars. Like, maybe Jay White goes too heavy on his shtick and, interference and, time wasting. Maybe he goes too heavy on that and the match suffers as a result. But if Jay White has his working boots on, to use a very stereotypical term, if he's actually being like, okay, I need to prove myself to the New Japan fans, I need to have like a blow away performance. If he has that mentality, he can easily produce like a 4.5 star match because he's going up against Tanahashi. Of course, that's a possibility. As for the actual result, like, what do I think is going to happen? Some people seem to be really thinking that we're going to get another case. I guess it's not as extreme with Okada, immediately getting hot-shotted on the title from returning, but people think we're sort of going that direction with having someone who's like a sort of B-level star coming into the company and pretty quickly getting the main title. I don't know how I feel about that, because I just don't think, like, Jay White is the best heel in New Japan right now, but he doesn't have the in-ring wrestling credentials to deserve being the champion. And that's the number one thing to me. Like, you can have a totally, like, average or even maybe bad character, but if your in-ring wrestling is actually good enough, which sometimes sort of counters the idea, like, you can't really be too bad of a character if your wrestling is, at a certain level. But yeah, so I'm just like, I don't think Jay White is ready for this. But then it's also makes me think, well, why would New Japan randomly force these two to having another match? Because they already had their rematch from based off of Jay White's win over Tanahashi in the G1. You know, they had that at King of Pro Wrestling, or was it Power Struggle? They had that at one of those shows, and Tanahashi beat Jay White. Like, yeah, it was a roll-up or, you know, cradle pin, so maybe you could say, oh, it wasn't a legit win because he just caught Jay by surprise. But, you know, that's like talking from outside of kayfabe, because inside of kayfabe, Tanahashi still pinned Jay White clean in the ring, especially considering all of Jay White's attempts to use, like, you know, illegal weapons and all that bullshit. Like, you wouldn't say in a football match, one team got like a crazy counter attack and that's the only way they ended up scoring, you know, the goal and in you know, winning the match. That's unfair. You'd be like, okay, these are the rules of the match. This is the rule of the game, and that's how they won. So that makes me think, if New Japan is going to just go against, I guess, their usual consistency with logic and say, okay, even though Jay White hasn't actually earned a title match, we're going to give him one despite that, it makes me think they probably are going to give Jay White the title. But then I think to myself, would they really do this whole story with Tanahashi sort of failing all throughout 2018? You know, he loses his IC title, he has an injured leg, he comes back to the New Japan Cup, makes it all the way to the finals, he loses, and then he finally gets to the G1, he can't beat Okada, but he ends up finally winning the G1, then he beats Okada, then he wins the title at Wrestle Kingdom, so he's gone from, like, you know, this downfall at the start of 2018, then this amazing, miraculous comeback. Would they really do all that just to give him the title for like a month and then, you know, hotshot it off to another guy? And I guess the more that I'm saying this out loud, I have to think to myself, yes, they actually might do that, because Tanahashi is what? He's 42 or 43 or something. He has to know that he is, you know, he's aging. He isn't as valuable to the company as he once was. Not to say that he's not insignificant. He's definitely still like the number, at minimum, he's like the number 2 guy in New Japan in terms of like who New Japan considers their most important guy. I still think number 1 is Okada. Then I think it's Tanahashi, and then probably Naito. So yeah, I think that Tanahashi would be like, yep, okay, I'm willing to do this. Hey, I get a victory at Wrestle Kingdom out of this, so hey, that's a best upside to this. I don't mind dropping the title a month later, especially if it's to uplift someone who the company believes in. I guess the issue for me is just that I don't see what the company sees in Jay. Like, I see potential, but that potential for Jay is like, I want to see Jay having, you know, blowaway matches in the G1 and then, you know, the New Japan Cup. I want to see, like, I appreciate his heel work, but at a certain point, it's like, okay, yeah, I like the character work of wrestling, but I also just want to see some awesome matches, you know, crazy athleticism and, you know, some real drama to them. And I guess I just don't know if Jay can produce that, but hey, I've usually trusted New Japan in the booking of the heavyweight title, at least for the last like 5 years. So maybe I should trust them here and say, you look, it looks like Jay's probably going to end up getting the title, and maybe I should trust them, see where that goes. And look, if this is a great match, maybe the match will tell us. Like, if the match is awesome and Jay White ends up getting the title, then I'll be like, okay, I didn't really expect this. I didn't really want this because I'm a Tanahashi fan. But you know what? I'll see where it goes, and we'll reassess in 6 months' time. A few weeks ago, I was sort of just perusing through Tanahashi, well, I guess the general IWGP heavyweight title statistics on Cage Match, and I realized this really interesting thing. If Tanahashi holds the title until the time of Dominion, which is the 9th of June, then he's going to be only like 4 days away from breaking Okada's record for the longest total days as IWGP Heavyweight Champion. And so I sort of made a big post about that on the New Japan subreddit, and some people were like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe they are going to do that story of Tanahashi trying to retake, you know, his legacy that we thought Okada had overtaken from him, and then it's going to be both Okada and Tanahashi in a title match at Dominion fighting for who gets to have the longest total reign. And some people were like, oh, you know, that's not really a massive, you know, like accolade to have. Like, oh, we thought the most important accolade was the number of defenses, but now what, New Japan is just going to say it's the number of total days. And I was like, oh, well, there's different sort of accolades you can have with the title. I think they're both sort of important to some extent, because to me, it's just like, obviously, I don't think that Gedo back in early 2015 knew that he was going to take the title off of Tanahashi via AJ Styles just in order so that in 4.5 years' time, he could plan so that Tanahashi would have an equal number of days, a comparable number of days as champion compared to Okada, so that they could have this match. Like, I don't think Gedo's looking like 5 years in advance. Obviously, that's, you know, that's crazy. But I do think to myself, that timing is so perfect. Like, because if Tanahashi loses the title at Dominion, and well, if he holds it until Dominion, then loses it, he misses out on like the total number of days as champion by like 4 days or something. Like, it's something very small. And it's just, if Tanahashi is champion, if he, for whatever reason, if he beats Jay White here, he survives the New Japan Cup Winners Challenge, and then he's champion at Dominion. I'll be annoyed if it isn't Okada facing him, and if they don't play up that idea of the legacy versus legacy with the total days as champion factoring in, because that's just a missed opportunity, just as much as it would be a missed opportunity to have if you had not focused on Okada, if you hadn't had Okada face Tanahashi to defend, to try beat Tanahashi's previously held record of total defenses, you know? Like, if you didn't have that factor into that match wouldn't have been as good as it was. And it was a great match, but because it played up on the idea of legacy versus legacy. And that's why it makes so much sense to me. Like, this year, have another legacy versus legacy match. And it would play off of what I've already talked about, which is how Okada and Tanahashi seem to be, like, way too friendly. Like, obviously the idea is that they're longtime rivals and now they're finally getting back together, you know, teaming together, finding out what each other is actually like outside of just facing each other one-on-one. But they seem to me to be hitting it over the head way too obviously, like, oh yeah, we're such good friends now. It's like there has to be a breakup point, or not like a big breakup, like, oh, one of them turns on each other, but there has to be a moment where it's like all sad, where it's like, you know, you're my rival, then you became my friend, but I need to, you know, make you my rival again so I can prove myself. You know, either guy could say that. And again, I know Lewis being pretentious with the New Japan analysis. I know, but look, that's a possibility, and that's what I really want. So that's like, if I was, you know, fantasy booking, I wouldn't have Jay pick up the title here. I still think it's way too early for Jay to have the title. And I would build up for a Tanahashi versus Okada match at Dominion. And I know what also makes that option less likely is that they already had 3 matches last year, and before that they hadn't had a match in like 3 years, so maybe that's a bit too much. But you have to remember they did Okada versus Omega 3 times in 1 year, and I thought that was extreme at the time, but all those matches ended up being like absolutely amazing. And it is Okada versus Tanahashi, so there is so much history there that it makes sense to play off of it. But yeah, in retrospective, if I had the booking again, if Lewis was fantasy booking, if, you know, Lewis thinks he's better than Gedo, if I was booking, I wouldn't have had 3 Okada versus Tanahashi matches last year. I probably would have had 2. I thought their G1 match, it was like still a great match, like an amazing match, but it wasn't as good as the other 2 matches. So that's the one that I would have taken away and been like, you don't need to be here. We'll move this to Dominion next year. So yeah, that's what I would have done. But look, for this match, this show overall, for the New Beginning in Osaka show, this could easily be a great show. There are a number of matches which are, like, I can go either way on. So I'm thinking, oh, this could be either great or really disappointing and all right. If all the big matches, so Ishimori versus Taguchi, Okada versus Fale, and Tanahashi versus Jay, if they all end up being good, obviously this will be a good show, but I'll still be disappointed overall, because then that would be 3 New Japan shows in a row where we haven't really had anything blow away. Like, as I said, I thought Taichi versus Naito was a great match, but it was like a low level great match. You know, it's not like it's like 4.5 star level that we have come to expect from New Japan. But yeah, that's it for my preview of the New Beginning in Osaka show. I hope you enjoyed it. I was glad to keep this to only like 40 minutes as opposed to my usual like 1 to 2.5 hour rants that I'll end up going on. Looking forward to the future of Pure Grade Pro Res. I have been watching, as I said earlier, I mentioned like in an offhand comment, I've been watching the Dragon Gate shows. I've been catching up on those. There is a Dragon Gate show with Puck defending the title against KZ, the Dreamgate title, and so I'm going to be reviewing the Dragon Gate 5th of February and 11th or 10th of February show. I can't remember which one it is. I'm going to be reviewing those 2 in a joint review. I think there's also there's definitely a Noah show coming up at some point as well. I mentioned that on my Sapporo review. That's got Kiyomiya defending the title against Kitamiya, so I'm also going to review that. I've been trying to keep an eye out on what other pro wrestling promotions have like shows, like big shows airing lately, and I haven't noticed any others, but I definitely want to review some Stardom, because I think Stardom has a big show, well, not a big show, but I think they have like a noteworthy show coming up, because I recently watched their January 14th show. I watched that quite late. I only watched that like a few days ago, and that was really good. That had some really, like a really strong second half of the card. So I've been keeping up with Stardom now. And yeah, whenever they have a next, you know, big show with like, you know, some title matches on there, I'll definitely get on to review that. Maybe I'll do a joint one with a Sendai Girls review, because I think Sendai also have some reviews, some shows coming out as well. I noticed one that recently came out. So yeah, look, just keep your eyes peeled to my Twitter, Pure Grade Puro. That's Pure Grade Puro. Also, just follow Pure Grade Pro Res on YouTube, iTunes, and Podbean. And yeah, if you have any questions, thoughts, queries, comments, just leave them on whatever platform you're on, whether this is Reddit, Facebook, YouTube, Podbean, you know, blah, blah, blah. You guys know the drill. leave a like and subscribe if you think I've earned it. If I haven't, hey, come back next week and I'll see if I can earn it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys later. Peace. See you guys. Bye-bye for now.